context to context. You can, I would say, separate this more broadly into risks and opportunities. The opportunity side is, I think, often forgotten. But the risk side is usually also divided into, on the one side, more extreme climate events, more extreme weather events, such as floods, such as droughts, such as tropical storms. And then also the smaller creeping problems that do not always make it in the international news, such as erosion, salinity of soil, salinity of groundwater, that then in the end result in lower crop yields, water stress in livestock, water stress in crops. So I would say on the one side, more losses and more damages in agricultural productivity, but also in the means of production. On the other side, also certain opportunities, crops growing in areas where they have not been growing before.
Great. Daniela, you are representing the World Farmers Organization. You yourself are a farmer. How do you see climate change affecting smallholders and farmers?
I would say basically the same what my friend said here, but adding to what you said, basically the problems they have depends where they are. You know, sometimes they have floods. Sometimes they have the dry season has been extended for more time, and but the problem is they don't have. For example, credit insurance to take, you know, to help them to face the climate change problems, and also we can see the youth, you know, taking off from the farmers because they don't have expectation to leave the farm. So the climate change, you know, is involving social issues also, not only for the agriculture.
Can you just remind us where you're working? You're working in which region?
I work in Brazil, and Brazil is a huge country, and we see different problems related to climate. But what I said, you know, about the social crisis of the smallholder agriculture is the same everywhere in Brazil. And I had talked to other organizations and representatives from smallholders in South America is the same. And so we need to talk more about youth and gender, for example, when to talk about climate change also.
And we can widen that out to the whole of the Latin American region with one here. Would you be in broad agreement with that? What are you seeing as the trends across the region?
Of course, I agree. You know, the differences between countries, of course, they're localized, like Gerald said, but the effects on small farmers are usually the same. Small farmers are more affected disproportionately by weather events and climate events, things that happen in a country. Maybe they're felt like natural and normal in the cities, but they're affecting disproportionately small farmers because they don't have the same means to cope with it. They don't have the access to finance, they don't have the access to better resources. So it's difficult for them to adapt easily if you don't have the enough support.
Okay. Now, one of the things we're seeing, we hear a lot about how the power sector, how industry, how we hear a lot about forests at this meeting here in Lima. We don't hear so much about the smallholder sector of agriculture and how they are contributing to the problems of climate change. Are smallholders not part of the problem as well? Should we be looking at reducing, taking them seriously, more seriously?
Well, it's a good question, I think, because in a sense, everyone who has a very direct interface with climate-sensitive natural resources can be part of the problem as well as part of the solution. And we certainly have a lot of cases where you look into agricultural practices such as slash and burn in Indonesia, or the overuse of fertilizer, where you can say that also small farmers can contribute to the climate change problem. But I think what's very important to keep in mind in that respect is why smallholder farmers are adopting these technologies. This is the critical question, because very often there are not many alternatives. There is no access to technologies. There is no access to finance to adopt alternative technologies. So this is usually then the entry point that we use in order to add value.
Daniela, is there anything in the Brazilian
Yeah, in Brazil, for example, the government supports the large agriculture, we say agribusiness. For example, they support them each only for 2014. This year, they supported with more than 120 billion reals. It's about $70 billion. And for smallholders, they support about $8 billion. And in Brazil, 70% of the food, that we eat every day comes from family farmers. And so that's a big difference. So we need, but in family farmers we see each day they buy more and more inputs for like seeds, fertilization, for the crops, because they have no choice. The microfinance, it's almost mandatory. You need to buy them to grow the crops.
One, is there anything?
Well, there's one thing that I wanted to add to that is that, of course, small farmers, of course, emit gases to the atmosphere. But recently, we've been studying that a little. What's the contribution of small farmers? What's the actual balance of the emissions? And the preliminary results of our study show that although there is an emission, small farmers are contributing to mitigation. And that's interesting because our projects are not designed to that. Are designed to reduce poverty or to adapt to climate change. And we're seeing that most of our projects also have these benefits, which is interesting because we can change the way we see small agriculture. It's not only adaptation, it's not only poverty reduction, we're also contributing other global goals.
So would you say, Juan, that smallholder farmers are a vital part of the solution to climate change? And that's something this conference in Lima should be taking more seriously.
I would say so. The analysis, the calculations we made, that are specific for the project areas. Of course, maybe at the national level or regional level, maybe the figures are different. But at least for our projects area, the results are very encouraging. So I would say if we keep analyzing, we keep getting more data, we'll see that maybe the ideas that we had from the past, or maybe things that we'll not discuss in the future, will be important, and that will help us to channel more resources for small farmers.
Daniela, what's your take so far? I mean, Lima's only 3 days in, there's 2 weeks in total here, but what's the reaction from governments, from delegations, when you're talking about the types of solutions you can put in place to help adapt, to mitigate to climate change in your work? Are they welcoming this? Are they listening?
Well, it is important to create opportunity, actually, of the smallholders to get together, to create organizations that represent them, or get together to create cooperatives that they can discuss their demands, and so go to the government or other space to talk about their needs. The way we are doing in Brazil is basically in this way, we have a huge organization called Unicafes, the Union of Family Farm Cooperatives, that represent a variety of cooperatives in the whole country, and go to talk to the government, because that's the way we found to represent family farmers. try to change the law, try to create public policies, things like that. The way we think is create opportunities to family farms to get together and create wars together. That's the way we think.
I'd just like to remind people who are watching us, if you do have any questions for us, please do send them in via Twitter, via Facebook, via Google+, and we will put the questions to the panel here in Lima. And to you, Gernot, how do you see smallholders contribute to the solutions, or what lessons are smallholders giving us to see how to adapt to climate change, how to mitigate better?
Well, I mean, the point of smallholder farmers being part of the solution, I think, is a point that is insufficiently raised in these international climate change negotiations, because very often we hear, smallholder farmers, poor smallholder farmers being referred to as victims, which certainly they are in terms of not having contributed to the problem in the same amount as industrialized countries have. But there can be something remarkably disempowering about being referred to as a victim. And in the end, the way IFAD sees smallholder farmers is we see them as small enterprises who are able to unleash considerable innovation potential, considerable added value in the value chains that they are connected with, so that they can basically contribute to the solution, to the climate change puzzle that we're all trying to solve. And to me, the first starting point is recognizing that smallholder farmers are not just poor people who require charity and handouts, but that they are small enterprises that require certain types of support so that they can contribute to helping us solve this puzzle that we're all connected.
Great. We do have some comments which are coming in online. The first comment is from Mildred Crawford from the Jamaica Network of Rural Women Producers. Mildred has said that Caribbean rural women are affected in a unique way. Panelists mentioned soil erosion as risk, but I wish to include long periods of droughts, which result in water shortages, which is critical for agriculture and impacts negatively on competitive market expectations. Now, she also goes on to say this constituency is neglected in dialogues and their contributions as small farmers are not taken seriously, although data suggests that they are resourceful. As family farmers, subsistence farmers, I would love more discussion on climate change impacts on this region at COP20. Would anybody like to comment on that?
Well, just a little on Jamaica. I know a little bit the agriculture sector in Jamaica, and it's naturally affected by droughts. And of course, to collect water, to create irrigation systems, or to try to cope with that drought problem, this is very expensive in the case of Jamaica. But there are solutions. The thing is to make the decision, say, let's fix this. It's going to be expensive, but we can do it. I guess in the case of small farming for small islands, there are other issues applying as well, because the climate effect is more, and I would say, stronger for them. It's not only the traditional way we see climate change, but also drought that we wouldn't think that it's more likely in places.
I think in Brazil there are not enough possibilities, space to talk about climate change in the way we can support family farmers. And I think it would be a very good opportunity to share what other organizations or experience in South America and Central America regarding to the way you are working with crops, technical assistance, technologies, and all to make a South American networking, something like that. We need that to share experience.
So, Björn, is there a clear message that we should be sending to negotiators at COP20 in Lima in relation to all this?
Well, if I had one message that I would like people to take up on, it would be that smallholder farmers are very good clients for climate finance. So there are these big discussions about the Green Climate Fund, about providing additional finance to developing countries so that they can adapt to climate change and also reduce emissions. But then there's always the question, how do you program that money the best way? I mean, what are the options? I mean, there are always trade-offs. I mean, you can invest in an early warning system, you can invest in resilient crop varieties, you can invest in smallholder farmers, you can invest in the bigger industrial agriculture and the farms and value chains. But I would say that, you know, what IFAD studies have shown and what we see in our daily work is that if you manage to get climate finance directly to smallholder farmers, and there I mean the local cooperatives, the women's savings groups, the farmer water user groups, then you get a big bang for your buck. I think it's just there's a lot of evidence that we still need to provide also to the national negotiators, so firm numbers that are going to pin that argument. But we are in IFAD seeing this on a day-to-day basis. The more localized you go, the more the more integrated the problems become. Water issues, on forest issues, on trade issues, the more relevant are these small farm communities.
Okay, great. We also have another question in from Oko Williams. We have two questions from Oko. The first question is, how can smallholders achieve the green economy? Daniela, would you like to think about it?
The green economy. They need more support for technical technology, but mainly we need to include more women and youth on this discussion. You know, as we know that women have a great perception of cooperative, or she provides more provided the subsistence of their family, and I think the way we can treat this issue, it includes more women to this discussion, providing opportunities to grow.
How do we reach this ideal of the green economy, whatever the green economy is?
I guess it's an ideal, you know, that we're trying to get there. But I think that the technologies exist, the activities or the things that we can do to get to the green economy. But I think personally that it's a more efficient way to produce something with less energy and less inputs. Thinking water or thinking land that you need to produce a specific amount of food, for example, with less external inputs, chemicals or fertilizers. And I think the technologies exist. Sometimes it's difficult to implement them because you don't have access to them. Maybe you don't know they exist. Or sometimes it is that you don't have the necessary incentives. The country, as it evolves, it creates some restrictions, some inflexibilities in the system, and the farmers cannot use some technology, for example, pre-irrigation, because there is a national law for irrigation that restricts some kind of activity. So I think that's where IFAD and its work with small farmers and the interest of agriculture, we can influence and help to set the things straight and to help small farmers to move in that direction. I think it can be done.
Yeah, are there any sort of concrete examples of where we are already doing that within the portfolio of work that IFAD's adaptation for smallholder agriculture program, exactly as it sits behind us, is working already?
Well, the green economy is very often referred to as, an economy where you achieve very low carbon, sustainable growth that does not undermine the natural resource base of future generations. And I think there are, what Juan de Dios has said, there are a few technologies that can help us achieve this. One example we have in our portfolio of adaptation dimensions is the mobile biogas technology. Biogas is one of these technologies that have multiple wins. Basically, you can feed the animal waste into a biogas digester, and you can generate electricity that you can then use for lighting your house so that children can study in the evening. You can substitute potentially hazardous indoor cooking arrangements where people get respiratory infections. So biogas is, I would say, one of these examples of a technology that, if we get these incentives right, if we manage to bring the cost down so that people can get access to commercial lending and buy a biogas digester, that can help transform an economy. But it requires critical mass, it requires initial investments, it requires support to local entrepreneurs who are willing to establish small value chain around biogas digesters. That is what IFA can do to raise them.
Is there enough, the question that comes to mind for me, is there enough climate finance available now? How much more do you need?
Well, climate finance, to me, this is more the question, can we really get to a green economy only with public finance? Can we provide climate finance grants over and over and over again until we have achieved that elusive vision of a green economy? And I am pretty certain that we are not able to do that. I mean, all grants in the world, when you look at the climate fund, for example, although 10 billion US dollars are very substantive pledges, it is only a fraction of what is required. When you look at the economic studies about the impacts of climate change on the global economy, we are in the area of hundreds of billions, right? So it's public money is only going to be, I think, a very small part of the equation, probably one that needs to focus on creating incentives so the private sector financing can kick in, and the private sector can basically then adopt, like in the example of biogas, adopt certain technology and disseminate it. So I think private sector financing is a pretty popular approach. Public sector can be used to crowd it.
Great. We have a question in, I think, from one of our colleagues at the World Farmers Organization, Lisa Volpe. She asks, as an international governmental organization, what does IFAD propose to improve the focus on smallholder farmers within the COP negotiations? Is there anything you can do to interest governments in trying to put the issue out there to get it onto the agenda? So,
well,
that's my colleagues.
One thing about that, our day-to-day work, the field work, is with governments. The main counterparts, the main organizations, institutions that work with in the country, they're the natural counterparts. So we're in constant talking with them, we're constant contact and dialogue, trying to find solutions to certain problems, and that sometimes becomes a project. Not always, but sometimes becomes a project. So through that dialogue, we've been sending information and sharing information about the importance of small farmers, especially for climate change adaptation, but for other issues as well. So every time we meet with them, we insist on the importance of it. Of course, the Ministry of Agriculture of any country, they have many things to look at. It's not only the small sector, the small farmer sector, but we insist on that because that's our farm mandate, if that was with small farmers. So I guess through that relationship, we can send more messages, send more information, more data, share things that we're discovering in the field that maybe they're not aware of, and that will maybe open their eyes and make them see the things the way we see.
I think that this comment is echoed partially. We've got another comment in from Mildred Crawford, who's a rural farmer from Jamaica. She says the green economy needs to be defined by countries using a research-driven approach. For small farmers, it requires community audits, which will influence the choice of the right technology and within the geographical space. Daniela, how would you react to that?
In Brazil, there is a public policy that buy primarily food for family farms, like 30% of each food, you know, that they buy for school meals or hospitals. They had to buy 30% for family farms. And from this 30%, they want to buy organic food. But the problem is how to bring, you know, to raise organic food. The fact that smallholders, they need more technical assistance, they need to provide for technology to this. So there is some ideas, but we need to put more possibilities to achieve, you know, what we are getting, you know. We want the public policy, but we need to prepare more.
Okay, well, we're coming to the end of our half-hour Google Hangout, so I'd just like to give you 20 seconds each to give a final comment. So, Gernot, what is your message to people out there to COP?
My message to the people here in the COP is use smallholder farmers as agents of change to help us solve the climate change.
Yeah.
Give the small farmers the voice, you know, creating opportunities to them to create cooperatives, associations, put them together so they can show how strong they are.
Great. And one final word to you.
Well, a message would be to use the resources that we already have, you know, the knowledge that's been accumulated, not only by IFAD, but by other agencies to make a better decision.
Great. Okay, well, I'd like to thank all the participants today here in Lima at the UN's Climate Summit. And would like to remind you that any questions sent during the Hangout will be answered shortly. We'll get back to you. You can follow IFAD online at the Climate Summit at ifad.org/climate/COP20 and also on Twitter, #IFADClimate. The Smallholder Advantage report can be found on the web. Just go to ifad.org/climate/COP20. Thanks for joining us, and for me, Brian Thompson, bye for now from Lima. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. And we're off.